We'll begin here. This is our third of our Bhagavad Gita classes, and we're going to take section text number 16 through 38, and that's what we're going to do today. And we mentioned last time that the verses 12 through 15, they were kind of a really brief summarization of the main topics covered in this chapter 2. And so we're going to see this time how some of the this elements of the section we're doing today follows from some of those verses. So we're going to try to show the connection there. Um, so if we start with 12 and 13, this is where Krishna told Arjuna that he says, "Never there was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be." And the next one, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So the gist is that that there is for at least the essential part of ourselves, there's no death at all. Neither birth nor death, but for the body there is. Okay, and so because you wonder, well, if we're eternal, we never didn't exist, never will exist. What is it? What does death mean? We experience that people come and go, and Krishna explained that in 13 that there's simply a change of bodies, but then that he just left it alone at that point. So here in the next section 16 through 30, he gives a more detailed explanation of that. Remember, he's trying to help Arjuna to overcome his just kind of sheer terror and aversion to killing his family, an understandable aversion, and he's trying to show Arjuna what the essential bit of knowledge that he was missing. In text 11, he said that, look, you're speaking like you're very wise, but you're not acting like it. And the people who are wise, they don't lament in this to the same degree that you do over these over the death of the body. And so he's going to then explain that essential bit of knowledge that hopefully will allow him to be pacified enough. It doesn't mean that he isn't going to feel compassion for his relatives and his friends and even regret that he has to do such a thing. But he'll understand that because that it's not something so significant that he should avoid doing his dharma, which is what brings good fortune to everybody, both the victors and the defeated. So the next verse shows how it follows. 2:16 follows, it picks up both of those threads from 2:12 and 2:13. 2:16 is, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, asata is the Sanskrit word, the material, and in brackets it says the material body, because it doesn't mention it specifically. This is just understood by context and by what comes afterwards. There is no endurance, and of the eternal, and in brackets they have the soul, again, because it's not specifically in the verse, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So Krishna makes a general comment here that there's some things that are eternal, and they have in that sense, they have a greater reality. Things that are eternal, there's something more powerful about that. There's something more real. So the word asata means temporary or also unreal. That sat brings both of those connotations, that it's real, and that it exists and is real, and that it's eternal, eternality, and asata means the opposite, the negation of that. And so we'll see that he's talking about the soul and the body here, but here he just says there's eternal things and there's temporary things, and there's kind of a value judgment being given here, implied, that things that aren't as real are not as important as those which are real, and we're going to discover that the soul is the source of real value. So going on, so the topic of this first section is about it's never mentioned except for it's called just the embodied a couple of times. Mostly it's just referred to this is the kind of that thing we're talking about, that but we usually refer to it either as the soul, the atma, the jiva, the self, or in these verses, the embodied. That's how we usually talk about these things. When we talk about the soul, these things, and it makes them sound like an object. And it's a little bit, in one sense, I think, hinders our understanding, because what are these things? What's being talked about is us. That's who we are. It's not the, like we don't say the us, the I, usually. We even sometimes we may say myself or ourselves, but even that's kind of a possessive. So when Krishna talks about the soul, when he talks about the self, when he talks about the jiva, when he talks about that was embodied, that's us. We are that entity, and we'll be surprised when we hear about what we're really like. I think if we just take our experience in our life as a basis for our understanding. So it's us. So I'm giving a little example here of how that changes it if we understand it to be us. There's uh, there's a verse 217, and the translation is, that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So again, it sounds like an object, But what if you say, you pervade your entire body and are indestructible. No one is able to destroy you. It brings it closer to home, I hope. At least does for me. So we're indestructible, and we're pervading the entire body. And that also means, of course, that others, because others pervade their entire bodies and are indestructible. No one is able to destroy them. And that's also implied by that. So Arjuna knows that his friends and relatives and stuff, they in their essential selves will not be destroyed. Okay. So carrying on, and then that 217 gives us an idea of, well, then what are we? Who are we that pervade the body, and how can we recognize ourselves? We think of ourselves as our bodies and our minds. What are we? And in the purport of 217, Prabhupada gives a nice commentary where he says, this verse, 217, more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body, in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. So if there's something that we can directly perceive of our real self, it's our ability to have experiences. Our consciousness, our ability. This was the famous French philosopher Descartes was trying to find out what he couldn't doubt, because he said all of his knowledge he could potentially doubt. He said even my direct experiences of myself and of others and of the world around me, it could be some kind of an elaborate hallucination or an illusion. It could be the Matrix. He didn't have that example at that time, but something like that. You don't know for sure. You can't, and there's no way really to find out. But he said the one thing I can't doubt is that I'm here in some way. I have these experiences. I'm able to perceive even the illusion. Somebody has to be at least aware of even of the illusion. So that's us. We're the what has experiences, we're able to experience. Whatever else we experience is not really our real selves. So we're going to run through some of the verses, and I'm just going to extract the qualities of us, qualities of the soul or us, that are listed there. And there's some repetition. So in verse 218, it says that, it repeats that it's eternal. It always exists. We always exist. immeasurable. And Prabhupada says in the purport there, but the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. So we're very, very, very tiny. In the purport, it's Prabhupada quoted in the Upanishads, it's 1/10,000th part of a tip of a hair. If you divided the tip of a hair into 10,000 pieces, equal pieces, that would be the size of the soul. We had somebody who calculated that, actually. Very, very, very tiny, and therefore very powerful. Very, very powerful. Prabhupada mentions in another place, he said that just if you have a very, very powerful poison, a little tiny bit of it can destroy the whole body. So a little bit, a tiny bit of this of ourselves is enough. The small little self can power the whole body, and also it says we're indestructible. This is repeated also in 220. It says we are never born and we never die. We never have, do, or will come into being. There's a notion here that there's 6 transformations that things usually go through, and this verse kind of goes through and says that none of those things happen to us, to the soul. We're unborn, we're eternal, we hear it again, we're permanent, and are the oldest, and don't die when our body dies. So there was never a beginning. There never will be a new beginning. Never has been a beginning. Right? Been here forever. That's what eternal means. And when the body dies, it has no effect upon us. We continue to live. This is what Krishna is saying. And Prabhupada in his purport says, the soul does not at any time become old, as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore the soul is free from the 6 changes of the body. That's from the text number 20, Srila Prabhupada's purport. And then in 21, it says, immutable means you cannot be changed. No change in any way. Unborn, again, is repeated. Eternal, repeated. Indestructible, repeated. So it's we don't undergo any change. Actually, this should be kind of surprising to us. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But no change. We feel, even in this one lifetime, we've gone through many, many changes. So the soul doesn't change. We don't, and our essence do not change. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I just wanted to call attention to that a little bit for right now. And Prabhupada says in the purport, and also some of the other commentators say the same thing. This is from the Bhagavad Gita 225 purport. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error. So it means that they're really serious about this stuff. These are not approximations. We're kind of eternal. No, it really is what it is. They really mean it. So just in case you kind of, when something is really far out, your mind kind of halfway pays attention to it and lets it kind of slide out the other side. Yeah, maybe. But no, it really means that he's trying to really communicate this both to Arjuna and, of course, also to us. And then he tries to help Arjuna a little bit because, Arjuna is going to be fighting with his relatives. And he says that it cannot be. We cannot be cut or broken into pieces. We cannot be burned or dried, this is the soul. We cannot be moistened or dissolved. In text 24, everlasting we are, unchangeable again. So, the commentators say we have a fixed form. It doesn't change. And immovable, and the commentators say it means we have certain qualities that do not change, fixed qualities. Eternally the same. Again, and all of us together says that there's souls everywhere. Entities like us are present everywhere. So That's 224. And then it says, we are in the soul, right? Invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. That's text 225. And then 229, it says, we're amazing. And actually, it says that there's two things. It's either the soul is described as amazing, or those who describe it are amazed by it. The Sanskrit word for amazing there, I think it's ascharya, um, can be used to modify, can be used as an adjective and modify the noun, the soul, or as an adverb to modify how it is seen, and how it is spoke about, and how it is heard about. So it says. That people generally have no conception of this. This is actually a very secret concept, and that even rarely do people describe it. Rarely do people have a chance to hear about it, and even when they do, they're amazed by it and then have a difficulty to comprehend. It's so different from our experience, right? I mean, do we feel? It's amazing that we are eternal. We seem to remember a history. We were born, and then and when we know we're going to die, we see people die. We don't have any evidence of their continued existence, and we don't remember. We just remember we don't even remember all of our childhood usually. How far back do we remember? There are some people that remember past lives, but it's a rarity, and we certainly don't remember an eternality of time before. We certainly don't feel invincible like this. That that we've never changed. We seem to change even during this lifetime. So it's quite amazing to hear that's in our real nature, that's what we are. It says Krishna says it's amazing. We're amazing. Okay. Now in text 216 through 30. Krishna is giving Arjuna the philosophical understanding to be able to overcome the paralyzing effects of his compassion. That was the idea of him talking about how the characteristics of the soul, characteristics of who we and also everybody else is like. And so in 214, we were mentioning again how that 12, 13, 14, and 15 were kind of a summary. Krishna says in 214, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Sayana Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So he was telling him he had to, even though it was difficult, he needed to compose himself and still continue to do his duty. And so here in this section, we talked more just about what about the soul, about us. So far. Now we're going to talk about some of the other arguments that Krishna gives in that section. How he's trying to give Arjuna enough understanding that will allow him to compose himself. That will allow him not to just to be so completely taken by his grief and his compassion and his aversion to doing this thing that seems so terrible, taking part in this battle. So let's look at it. And so what Krishna told him during this section is that only bodies, which will eventually die anyway, will be destroyed in the battle. Right? Because we understood that the essence of everyone, the soul, us, will not be affected in any way. And that it kept being pointed out that the body always is destroyed sooner or later. He may be accelerating the process, but that there's no chance that any of us will remain in our present body forever. And there's a lot less than forever time limit on that. And so he says, so in one sense, death is something everybody has to go through in that way, the change of the bodies. And so for the right cause, then it's something that's more conceivable and doable for Arjuna. And then in reality, then Krishna also gives him he gives him at least a little bit of emotional distance from the actual act of killing, because Krishna tells him, says, in reality, it is Arjuna's body that will be destroying others' bodies. He mentions that the soul neither kills nor is killed, isn't it? So he mentioned, because because the soul is giving life to the body, but actually is not directly performing actions. Arjuna is still responsible. He has to make that decision. Is he going to participate? Is he not going to participate? But the soul is the consciousness. And so it's actually what's really happening, if you saw things clearly, is that the one soul's body is killing the other soul's body. And it's not quite as immediate as Arjuna is feeling it. So Krishna kind of gives Arjuna a little bit of emotional distance from the effect, from the act of killing, and then he reassures him, because when he listed that it can't be cut to pieces by any weapon, or burned by fire, moistened by water, withered by the wind. These are different kinds of weapons that the Kshatriyas could use. They have little mantra surcharged arrows that can produce fire weapons and water weapons and wind weapons, and of course they have also swords and lances and such things, and so they're of course obviously they're used to fight with and used to kill, and Krishna by focusing on those particular qualities, because we already said it's indestructible, it can't be killed, it can't be destroyed. Here he specifically mentions the sorts of things that happen when one is struck by weapons. One can either be cut, or one can be burned, or one can be covered with water or blown by the wind. That these things will not harm the essence of his relatives. They will not even be touched. I mean, if you can imagine, we can imagine perhaps, being eternal. But can we really believe that that say we were in the middle of an atomic explosion? If we were so, that we actually would survive that completely untouched. Our essence, the body would be completely vaporized, but we could survive that. So he was trying to give, so that he was trying to give Arjuna some reassurance that it's not as bad as it seems, even though he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to kill them, obviously. And then he mentions the verse Vasangsi Jirnani Bahaya, where it says that the death and rebirth are just like changing clothing. And sometimes we have old clothes and we exchange them for new clothes, and and he compared it to changing bodies. The commentators say that he was particularly trying to reassure Arjuna about his the people he had the most affection for, Bhishma and Drona. We saw how when Krishna first challenged Arjuna about his not wanting to fight, that Arjuna focused on these two people, Bhishma, his teacher, and his grandfather, that he felt so particularly bad about fighting with. And so Krishna was hinting that they're old, they'll get new bodies. It'll actually be a benefit for them. We'll see actually what kind of new bodies they're going to get later on. But he's trying, again, reassuring that it's not quite as cataclysmic as Arjuna is perceiving it. Okay, we'll talk about that doesn't mean that killing can happen arbitrarily. We'll talk about that a little bit later, about the couple of different extremes we can go if we think that the material world of temporary things doesn't have real meaning, whereas the soul has the meaning. There's a couple different ways that people can go to extreme on that, and we'll talk about those two things, two misconceptions. But let's continue with Krishna's argument to Arjuna why he should fight. So Prabhupada says in the purport to 230, in describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher, Bhishma and Drona, will die in the battle. Okay? So that's, Prabhupada summarizes what he's saying there. In one sense, they're not going to even be touched, and what is going to be touched and destroyed would have been destroyed at some time in the future anyway. And so, since he's acting for dharma, which we see actually produces the best good fortune, these are rules that are set up by Krishna, and when you follow them, you can be guaranteed that you're doing the best possible thing both for yourself and for others. So he said that and that's why his compassion, we mentioned before, was blown out of proportion when he didn't want to do his dharma. His compassion, his desire not to do injury to anybody else was beautiful and noble, and that's how we should be. Prabhupada said he showed his pure soft-heartedness and pure-heartedness. That's the right approach, but not when it crosses over the borderline of doing the right thing. Then out of sentimentality, you're actually going to do harm. So then in text 31 through 37, Krishna kind of revisits what he said in the second verse of chapter 2, when he first challenged Arjuna's misconceptions. And that verse, if you recall, this is 2:2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy." So in verses 31 through 37, we've taken it in sections here, and explains why Arjuna should do his duty and take part in the battle. Okay, so and it follows from this things where he said that this will not take you to higher planets, but to infamy. Right? That's what he said previously. So this explores that part of it in particular. And here's how he does it. So Krishna encounters Arjuna's claim that fighting with family members, and especially with Bhishma and Drona, was against dharma and therefore sinful. In verse 31, and 31 is, "Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation." So now he's going to emphasize the role of dharma. He's going to emphasize also the fame part, and the fact that Arjuna was saying everything was going to happen is going to be a disaster. Everything, nothing good is going to happen from this. So he's going to emphasize how by doing your dharma, everything good is going to happen. Krishna is going to support that claim. And so the other side had violated dharma by trying to usurp the throne, and personal considerations aside, Arjuna was duty-bound to defend dharma. That was actually his duty. He was trying to come up in the latter parts of chapter 1, and also in the early part of chapter 2, he was trying to find objective reasons why he should not participate. And he was saying how he had no personal interest. He didn't care. He wouldn't even do this for all the three worlds, much less a kingdom. He didn't, he didn't want to kill any of these people. But he said, but Arjuna, Krishna tells Arjuna, no. He said, you take all your personal considerations and leave them aside. It's not about that. It's about dharma. So he says he has to do that. So he says, that's why he says, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. Okay? And then in verses 32 and 37, Krishna counters Arjuna's claim that there would be only negative results if the battle took place in verses 32 and 37. This is what Arjuna was saying. He said, I see only causes of misfortune. This is going to be terrible. And but actually, Krishna mentions here, and Prabhupada quotes in 231's purport, he says, Srila Prabhupada quotes the Manu Samhita there. He says, in the battlefield, a king or Kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death. as the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. So those that died would go to the heavenly planets. And the commentators say this is something even difficult for the Brahmanas to do because they have to perform many sacrifices in order to make that happen. So that they compare this to to being as part of a sacrifice when the especially it says when the kings die honorably, facing the enemy and not running away. The warriors, if they die, they will be able to. It's like almost like they're part of a sacrifice, and they will go to the heavenly planets, which is a different. And and so that will happen for everybody who dies in the battlefield. We also know that because Dharma would be a success on the battlefield was going to put saintly King Yudhisthira on the throne. We mentioned the effects of that later. So it'll also be a defense of Dharma, which is always going to be good. But otherwise, even in the battle, if his not only will his friends and relatives achieve new bodies, not be killed, but achieve new, better bodies, but it'll be in the heavenly planets. Which is people, the Brahmanas work very hard to attain that many times. It's a very desirable goal. So he said, what negative results are you talking about? Basically, Krishna is telling Arjuna, what? What in the world? Let's see here. And then, and Krishna explains later that Arjuna would incur sin. He was saying it was going to be sinful for killing his family and his relatives and his superiors. That's what Arjuna had given as a reason to not fight. And then Krishna says, no, you'll incur sin for failing to perform your duty, actually. And that was what was implied with when Krishna said that his act in 2:2 were asvargam, they don't take you to heaven. Right? That they're sinful instead of pious. Arjuna was thinking he was, by not participating in the terrible battle, that he was going to he'd be doing something noble and praiseworthy. But actually he says, no, it'll be sinful. You're saying it's sinful to fight, but actually it's sinful if you don't, because it's your dharmic duty to do so. And people will, instead of praising you for being such a noble person and such a good-hearted person, they're going to talk all kind of bad stuff to you. And in 2:34, 35, and 36, Krishna says, he says, people will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? So the kirtam, the infamy, will happen from this. They'll tell him that that you were such a great warrior. Everybody had so much respect for you, and then you were a coward and ran away. Because it actually doesn't make any sense. He doesn't have a noble reason for not doing it. Arjuna's thinking he's seeing the reality of the situation, but these ideas came to his mind just because of his great compassion that was overwhelming him. He just didn't want to do it. He was rationalizing and trying to find reasons. But when you look at it, the cold hard facts, he was obligated by Dharma to do it. And so if he leaves, it's not for a good reason, actually. And so then people will just say, oh, he was a coward. He took one look at us and ran. And that will be very, very painful for the Kshatriyas. Tend to have, at least, they are proud of their righteousness and proud of their courage and such things. They're very chivalrous, and so when you say something negative about their character, it hurts them pretty badly. So now I want to take a look at, because we even had a question last time concerning this, but it's also something that's relevant, because we're focusing here on how we as souls are eternal, and therefore, that's the most real part of us, and it has all these amazing qualities. And while the external world, our bodies and the rest of the external world, are temporary and changeable and don't have real value, right? Everything slips through your fingers, ultimately. This is what's happening to us. We people are trying hard to acquire some kind of status in life, some kind of position or safety or security or whatever they may be trying to do. They're trying to acquire a life. They're trying to have a life here in some way, and it's slipping right through our fingers. Time is such a subtle force. We can watch the hands on the clock turn round and round, but but um, but the real thing is that things are changing. Our bodies are changing and wearing out. Everything around us is slowly disintegrating and going away. So there's no, so in that sense, it's not fully real, you know. But yet the soul is. So sometimes we can think a couple of different things based on that. There are nihilists who will think that because both ourselves and others are changeless and unaffected by anything material, we are at liberty to act without any sort of restrictions. The world is meaningless. We can do whatever we want. Remember, Krishna is giving the argument here, for Arjuna to do his dharma. So he's trying to show the disparity and relevance, between the soul and the body and reality and everything, just so that Arjuna can compose himself enough to do the right thing, not that he can just do everything. Right? So we can think, nobody is killed, so I can kill people, right? And even the soul, I'm the soul, so I'm not even directly doing it. My body kills their body. Why should we have morality? Why should we have any compassion? Why don't we just do whatever we want? It's meaningless. A nihilistic type of idea. Right? Or because I'm a soul, and this is something that's actually, this next one is something that appeals to Arjuna. He brings it up in the next chapter. That if I'm a changeless, eternal, indestructible entity, and this world out here is all changeable and temporary and doesn't have any intrinsic value, then why should I even deal with it? Right? Because when I take it as real and important, and I feel I can make a permanent home here, it slips through my fingers. So why don't I just ignore it? It has nothing to do with me. So these are the two opposite arguments. Let me just do anything I want because it's meaningless. And because it's meaningless, I don't even want to take any actions. I don't want to be a part of it, especially when there's so many terrible things going on. Like the battle, for example. So Arjuna is actually going to bring this up to Krishna in the next chapter, and we'll clarify this more. So these are two kind of misconceptions we can take if we understand the conception of things that are temporary and things that are eternal that Krishna is giving us in this section of the chapter. And Prabhupada he gives a couple of comments in his purports that helps to clarify these points. This is from the 231 in the purport. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. Okay? Now remember, that's what Krishna was talking about. And he's going to emphasize that in the last verse in this section, 238. And Prabhupada is saying, as long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. And he says in 219 in the purport, he says, nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. And then Prabhupada says, if there were no rebirth for the soul, this is 226 purport, Arjuna had no reason to be afraid of being affected by sinful reactions due to his killing his grandfather and teacher. That would be the real nihilism. See, if there is no soul, if we're, as most people think many people think they are, that we're simply an organism, that consciousness arises in a mysterious way out of the brain, and that we didn't exist before we were born and we will not exist afterwards, as one life, then you can make the argument that there's no real meaning for anything. It might be meaning for us. I might prefer not to be killed, and so we may even gather together and say, hey, let's outlaw murder because nobody likes to get killed prematurely. But you can't argue that there's any ultimate value. Once you're dead, you don't know the difference anyway. You don't like the idea of it, but if you're killed, once you're dead, it's over. And it may have no effect on you whatsoever. And so you say, what is it? We're all going to die, and let's just have as much fun as we can. Everybody can do what they want. You can make that nihilistic argument on that level. But when there's the soul, then there's something of value in the equation. And even though there's a disparity in the value of the body and the rest of the material world and the soul, the fact is right now they're intertwined. And that's what both of the misconceptions we're failing to understand. And that's why Prabhupada says, as long as we're not liberated, then we have to act properly. Because right now, even though we are an eternal, unchangeable, so many wonderful, the amazing qualities, soul, and we're connected with something that has no eternal reality, no deep reality or value, the fact is we are connected. And we're going to talk about that connection a little bit later. And so if we want to realize the value of the soul, we have to learn how to become unconnected. And so just saying I'm having nothing to do with it, that can't affect that separation. And simply saying, hey, it's meaningless, I do what I want, well, that even makes it worse. That simply deepens our connection. So the only way, and Krishna is going to tell us what that's like, to break that connection and allow the soul to achieve our whole value, means that we have to engage in doing the right thing. We have to act in this world, but we have to do it in the appropriate way. And then that's going to be Krishna's argument. So let's take a look. Let's go on to, it says, although the temporary things of this world have no intrinsic value, we are currently bound to it and must act properly if we desire freedom. That's the point. That's what the persons with the nihilistic and the other philosophy just don't engage at all, are missing that fact that we're already stuck together when we need to fix that. So then the last of the verses that were a summary was 215. And this is where Krishna first talked about liberation, deathlessness, amrita. And O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. And so that goes right to text 238, where Krishna tells Arjuna, do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you shall never incur sin. Notice how it says, not disturbed in happiness and distress, and steady in both. Here it says, you don't consider these things, happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. He's clearly talking a similar thing, and he's talking. This is how if you act in this way, that then you have a chance towards liberation. Previously, in the verses just before that, he mentioned, was it 32 and 37, how that when people go to are killed, they go to the heavenly planets on the battlefield, on a properly dharmic battlefield, not just ordinarily, but on this battle that's dictated by dharma and done in the right way, the deceased will go to the heavenly planet. So it's already shown that by doing one's dharma, there's good fortune, not misfortune. That was Arjuna was saying, oh, it's going to be, everything's going to be terrible. Now he says that if we do the right thing in the right way, there's a way to do them also. Not just by doing them according to the basic laws of battle, that will happen. But if you have a certain attitude, a certain understanding, you bring some of the understanding that you had, that he just taught you about the body and the soul, to the activity, that actually leads you to liberation, even the higher goal. Because this is what Krishna was saying from the beginning. You know, in 215, he's saying this is our goal, that we want to attain liberation. There is no lasting value in this material world. And so he was pointing Arjuna towards that. To do that, then you have to not only do the right thing, but you have to do it with the right understanding and attitude. And that's what Krishna is bringing up in this verse. And what is that that thing? He does it without any kind of personally motivated interest. The other people, I have motivations. They want the kingdom very badly, and it even distorts their understanding and their compassion, and they're willing to do anything, to get it. But even they will get it by following the Dharma. They will, attain good fortune, not liberation. And if we remember how Arjuna was speaking about himself in chapter 1 and early chapter 2, we see that he is particularly suited to that type of action described by Krishna in 238. Since he already stated at length that he has nothing personal to gain from participating in the battle. He had no axe to grind as far as, he said, if he had the kingdom or not, he didn't care. He said, I wouldn't even do something terrible like this, for all the three worlds. He wasn't angered by all of their improper actions and provocations. So just that, so in that case, it's easy for him just to do it as a matter of duty. This is what Krishna says, fight just for the sake of fighting, just because it's the right thing. You do it because it's the right thing, not for any of the other results. And then, if people are in there saying, well, either, because he tells them, says either you killed and you go to the heavenly planets, or you die and enjoy the kingdom. That's the mentality of most of the warriors. They think like that. So you just do it. Whatever happens, happens. You don't have these desires, and that leads you actually towards liberation from the material world. So this is good. This is introducing a topic that's going to be taken up at length in the next section in chapter 2, and at length even more in chapter 3. This is called Nishkama Karma Yoga, doing your duty without kind of selfish desires, just doing it out of duty. And this is an ingredient for, we'll find out, for helping us to understand ourselves as we have been described here, as the soul has been described, and which is a prerequisite for us to try to move towards this liberation. Okay. So then Prabhupada, though, says something interesting about this text 238. He says it anticipates bhakti. And Prabhupada in the purport says, Lord Krishna now directly says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting, because he desires the battle. There is no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or loss, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness, so there is no reaction to material activities. So in the verse, Krishna doesn't exactly say that, but Prabhupada can see a bit into Krishna's heart, is the way I would put it, and he detects in there that this is Krishna's thinking like that, because Krishna's going to get to this point. This is going to happen later on in the Bhagavad Gita, that he's going to say, you just become my instrument. You do it for my sake. And Prabhupada says that automatically takes care of the quality there of not being concerned with the happiness or distress, profit or loss, victory or defeat, because you're doing it for somebody else. You have no personal axe to grind there, because you're doing it on somebody else's behalf. That is already automatically taken care of when there's service. So he says that Krishna consciousness automatically, if you do it properly, puts you in that proper frame of mind that leads to liberation. And apparently Prabhupada is, he's detecting that Krishna is thinking about this even now, even when he's saying, just do fight for the sake of fighting. He's thinking about what he really wants Arjuna to do, which is to, and what he really wants us to do. Because the first few chapters are leading up. The first 6 chapters lead up to the next 6 chapters really talk directly about bhakti. There's bhakti in the other ones, but it's not as concentrated. And so ultimately, and we'll talk about how that relates next time. And but Krishna ultimately wants us to serve him. He wants us to have bhakti. That's what this whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is. And so Prabhupada is saying that Krishna is thinking about this even now when he just tells Arjuna to fight for the sake of fighting, when he's talking kind of nishkama karma yoga. This is already in his heart. That's interesting. And it'll be something that we'll find out, that Krishna consciousness, if done appropriately, does the things of so many of the processes that Krishna gives here in Bhagavad Gita. So in Bhagavad Gita 2:20 in the purport, the soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of conclude. I want to talk about a little bit about how we misidentify. Okay, because we talked about all the different qualities that we have as souls, and I certainly, if someone's coming at me with weapons, I have a little trepidation, but so I think we can understand, at least to some degree, how we're not exactly the body. Prabhupada mentions this. We have the text 2:13 talk about the changing bodies. So we have perceived already, even in our lifetimes, how much our bodies have changed, and how just like he says, the so-called old man, we feel in many ways so much the same as we always did. The old, as we get older, we don't feel old in some ways. So the body does, but in many other ways, we feel that I'm the same person I was. So that we can get some hint of the unchanging and eternal nature of ourselves through that. So I think intellectually we can kind of get to that, and how our body has changed so much, how we could be in a different body. I think we can imagine that enough. We can imagine it through other things, and we dream, at night, and we know that our actual body is just lying there, but we have a dream body. We can close our eyes and daydream. If we're really vivid at that, we can almost have a body that way too. So I think we can kind of imagine ourselves in other bodies. So we can that much we can get. But what about the rest of the things? Okay, so the above changing bodies example may give us some understanding of how we are not our physical bodies. But what about there's the subtle body as well? We don't just have a physical body. Because oftentimes we think that the soul then is our mind, our thoughts. Then, right? There's in the West we have this notion of a mind-body problem, a dualism. There's something that's thinking up there, and how is that connected with the physical body? So I'll give you a little kind of quick little meditation. And what if you can imagine yourself that you could suddenly your fairy godmother came and hit you with a wand, and you became a child again, the same body you had when you were 6, 7 years old, and people started treating you like a young child, and people were expecting you to be a young child. I think at that point we would notice also so many other ways that we have changed, even though we remember ourselves being in that position, and that's the same me. The same consciousness was there. But we realize so many other things have changed. Our minds are so much different than we were when we were 4 or 5 or 6. We understand things in so many different ways. And we have a different conception of who we are. Right? And so if we were forced to act like little children again, we would notice those differences really quickly. People would treat us like little kids that didn't know anything, and you know, it would drive us crazy. We might want to be children again, but we wouldn't want to, know everything that we know. We would feel very uncomfortable. That's because the subtle body has changed. Right? Our minds have changed. We think so many ways differently. The way we perceive things. We sometimes we think I would like to go back at maybe a shorter distance in time, knowing what I know now. And not quite back to childhood, but maybe a little bit younger. Because of that, we learn things, we understand things differently. And so in that way, we've transformed a lot. We wouldn't be comfortable in that situation, I think. And even if the notion of being able to play all day was kind of attractive to us, it would grow old if we didn't have a chance to at least take some time out and act like an adult. So that means there's changes in our minds, there's changes in our understanding, and changes in our conceptions of ourselves. That means, but the soul doesn't change. So that means those things are part of the temporary world. They're not part of ourselves, our essential selves. They're not part of the soul. We must be separate from those. We're separate from the mind. We're separate from our understanding. We're separate from our self-conception. So we may be able to imagine ourselves separate from our body, but what about our mind, understanding, and our self-concept? Can we imagine ourselves like that? That's a lot harder to do. Because the mind actually, and these things travel with us birth after birth. They've been with us a long time, but they're changing. We know. Think about it this way. We know that we've had many, many, many births, and many of them have not been human. So the way we think and the way we understand and the way we think of ourselves wouldn't fit in another body. Or if we brought the mind, we were a horse and we brought the mind and intelligence and the self-conception of a horse into this body, it wouldn't fit. So they have to change in order to fit into the different bodies. So it's really difficult for this. So it brings up the question, why do we have a hard time to understand our own selves? It seems like that would be the easiest thing to understand, right? Some of the other things should be more difficult. So why is it that even on a very basic level, we hear about the soul and it's amazing, and we try to imagine how we have those qualities, and it's bewildering, and we try to imagine what it is, and all we can come up with so far right now is that we're conscious. Our consciousness is what's remaining the same. That's all we can perceive of our own selves. Why can't we perceive anything else? And why do we identify so strongly with the mind and the body? It seems odd, right? It seems like we should be able to know ourselves, if anything. Right? Why should that be so difficult? So I want to take a little bit of a look at how we come to the point of this misidentification. And there's three verses that I found in the Srimad Bhagavatam that to me imply a 3-step process. And the first one is in the 11th canto in the chapter 28, text 12. And it's Yavad dehendriya pranar atmana sanakarshanam samsara paravangstavad aparto pyavavekanaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, as long as the foolish spirit soul, our foolish selves, remain attracted to the material body, the senses, and the vital force, the prana and the body, the indriya, the senses, and the life air, the prana, his material existence continues to flourish, although it is ultimately meaningless. And a couple of the words in there that are important, I included the purport here in the slide here. There's sanakarshanam, there's an attraction, and palavan, which means very fruitful, bearing fruit. And so in the purport, it's interesting, the comment is made here. It says, here the word sanakarshanam, attraction, indicates that the pure spirit soul voluntarily connects himself with the material body considering this a most fruitful arrangement. Actually, the situation is apartha, useless, unless one uses his. Well, anyway, the main point I want was that first sentence. The word sanakarsham indicates that the pure spirit soul voluntarily connects himself with the material body, considering this a most fruitful arrangement. And we have this deeply rooted optimism about the equipment that we have, our minds and bodies, and we think we can get something that says it would be fruitful, something good's going to come out of it. That we can use this. This is really exciting. So there's an attraction and an enthusiasm for being part of this material creation and having our bodies and minds, and because we can do so many things and go so many places. When the younger we are, we seem to have so many more possibilities, and we're so excited about this can happen and that can happen, and when this happens, it's going to be so wonderful. And so when you have enthusiasm for something, the second step happens. This comes from Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 21, text 22. Vishaya beneveshena natmanam vedanaparam vriksha jivikaya jivam vyartam vastrevaya shvasan. Because of absorption, there's abhiveshana, over-absorption, Prabhupada says in the word translation. Because of absorption in sense gratification, vishaya, one cannot recognize himself or others. Living uselessly in ignorance like a tree, one is merely breathing just like a bellows. So it says, why don't we recognize ourselves? Because it says we're over-absorbed in vishaya. So when you have interest in something, right, it takes your attention. Right? We say we become absorbed in something. People become obsessed with something. And so the absorption means, our attention is taken by it and is focused on it. And so this sense gratification, vishaya, means the happiness that we can gain from using the mind and the body and the resources of the world. So that enthusiasm that we think, hey, this is going to work out, right, leads to an obsession, where we just spend all of our time and energy on that. We see, whatever people have different types of addictions. You have, the video game geek, who barely can come out of the video game. Well, our kind of virtual reality that we have here, is immersive. It has all the different things. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. It's persistent. It goes on and on and on. And we have so many different opportunities that it takes all of our attention away. So all we can recognize of ourselves is we begin to forget that we're even there. I had a friend, so I have a little stock example. I had a friend back when I was in college who was a very interesting guy, and I had many interesting conversations with him. But he had this weakness for the television. And you could be having a conversation with him, and a television set could turn on. I had this experience across the room. So he was even quite far away. And this was before you had I'm an old guy, so this is before we had the big screen TVs. So you couldn't even see it that well. The TV turns on, and in mid-sentence, it's like this gigantic, vacuum or this magnetic force is applied to him, and it just sucks his attention in. And it takes some doing to even get him to acknowledge your presence after that, to kind of wake him up out of that. So that's like the magnet of this of all the opportunities here that are given by our minds and bodies in the world around us is like a magnet sucked our attention. So that, he didn't know where he was. He didn't know I was talking with him. You could kind of tell, you call his name, and you could kind of tell it's like his name would kind of echo. He would perceive it as if it's echoing through the mountains, and oh, here I am, and then he's back to you, And then the third one is where it gets locked in. And this is actually a famous verse here. Prabhupada talks about fear, but it's 11th canto, chapter 2, text 37. Bayam dutiya beneveshna shad Ishada petasya viparyayo smriti tadmaya yato buddha bhajetam bhaktyaya kayesham gurudeva tatma. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. Again, this word abhiveshanata comes around, because of absorption. So he says the misidentification, viparyayaha, and forgetfulness comes because of this absorption. So the enthusiasm leads to absorption, which then leads to misidentification. You forget that you ever were somebody else or something else. You think that, the part of this world that is most closely associated with you, the mind and the body, that's me. Prabhupada says we do this in some ways. We do this when we watch movies. Even though we know that, it's not real. We know we don't even feel anything. Right? But if we're looking through our fingers, if it's scary, or we're real excited when that happens, when something happens that we want to have happen, or or we're in tears if some tragedy happens, and we know it's not real, but we kind of invest ourselves in it. Prabhupada talks about somebody who loves their automobile so much that when they they get in an accident, they say, "Oh, I'm hit." We have this experience of identifying with things that are a lot less worthy of being identified with. We're conscious of the body and the mind, so they're right next to us. And if we focus on this, we begin to think it's us, and we forget that we barely even understand that we're watching, and we forget who it is that's watching. So the reason I went through this is that I think it'll help us to understand how the processes that Krishna gives in the remaining part of the chapter will help us to overcome this misidentification. So that's the end of the slideshow. So I will, if I can here, I'll stop the screen sharing, and okay. So we ended a little bit earlier. So let's. I had a harder time here because of the way my setup today. I couldn't see the time very well, so I hurried through things a bit. I guess what I wanted to have a few more minutes before we'll go to questions, and what I want to mention also is just how we relate as bhaktas, to this information. That again, just like Arjuna, the notion of the separation between the body and the spirit, and the relative value of the two, means that we're looking for maximizing the spirit and realizing the spirit's potential. As devotees, we have a particularly good opportunity for acting in the material world in a fruitful way, because we have the opportunities to use everything in Krishna's service. And so we can still be here in the world, even though the world is intrinsically meaningless, and it gains meaning because we can do what the soul really does, which is serve Krishna. And so that really helps us. So we shouldn't be too want to withdraw too much. What we want to do is withdraw from the notion of misidentification and try and the vishaya, the enjoying the pleasures of this virtual reality, which keep us misidentified. So we have kind of a really good opportunity as devotees to deal with this. What's going to happen now in the next rest of the chapter, and the next actually few chapters, is we're going to hear about first of all, we're going to hear about this nishkama karma yoga, acting like Krishna had told Arjuna to do, acting in that right way of just doing it for the sake of fighting. So doing the right thing without so many personal motivations, and how that's going to help us develop knowledge and be able to break the absorption and understand ourselves as spirit. And then we'll learn how that the more we bring that into our actions, we'll get a chance to be able to control our minds. and we'll be able to focus more on the spiritual. And these things will be very important to us. So we're going to discuss how next time how these different steps. In one sense, you can see these chapters as leading up to Krishna consciousness, but Prabhupada shows us how they're related to Krishna consciousness. So you see in Prabhupada's Gita, he talks about bhakti from beginning to end. So we'll discuss that a lot next time, and then start talking about this nishkama karma yoga at that time. So I'm gonna unmute everybody here.
All participants are unmuted.
And so we can, if there's any questions, we can deal with that.
Yes, Hare Krishna. This is Radhakanta Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu Dhanavad. Thank you very much for the wonderful class again. I think very, very beautifully put, and I was trying to understand and make notes about the various important points and threads of arguments that you were actually teaching us today. Definitely one thing that stood out to me is your highlighting of how Krishna explains very clearly of us doing the right thing, that is dharma, in the right way, so having a correct understanding. So what really stands out to me is that combination of doing the right in the right way. So I'm hoping that perhaps now for a little bit, and even as we continue studying Bhagavad Gita together, we actually further explore that combination of doing our dharma in the right way, because I think that's really important as aspiring devotees to understand how do we actually practice our Krishna consciousness on a daily basis, every day in this material world, in the right way. What is the correct absorption to actually make advancement in along our path in bhakti?
Yes, that is going to be a focus, actually, because this is the first introduction of it. He's really in text 38. He just introduces that topic. It happens a lot of times in the Bhagavad Gita. There'll be a kind of a verse at the end of a chapter that introduces the what's happening in the next chapter. So that's really what. So this is not at the end of a section. It introduces the next section. So he's kind of introducing it here, but then he's going to cover it in a lot more detail, both in certain sections of the remaining part of chapter 2, and in chapters 3 and 5, and then of course even in the middle chapters where bhakti is talked about exclusively. So it is a topic we're going to keep revisiting. So you will get your wish on that for sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prabhu.
Well, so we will be. Let's see. I think we'll be on again for next week, but then I'll be away for a couple of weeks after that. So we'll have a couple of weeks without class. Next week will be also we'll have we should have the conference room available. We had to go just online today because of we're having holy celebration tomorrow, so all spaces are being used very intensively for the preparation for that. So I had to slip into my own private quarters here and do that. So we'll also have the live in-person option again will be open next week, and then as well as the online and recording options. And then, but then for a couple weeks, so I'll be away, and so we'll have a little bit of a break and pick up after that. So I thank you also very much. I hope it worked okay. My internet's a little bit shaky here sometimes, so hope it worked out. And thank you very much. Hare Krishna.